For sure. You guys want to jump into that topic first, the Epstein's Island stuff? Someone brought up in the chat already. There was an interesting interview that Alan Dershowitz did with Kim Iverson. This comment isn't quite accurate, though. He didn't admit that Epstein was a Mossad agent. He said that Dershowitz admitted that he's been working for the Israeli government for years and said that the Mossad wouldn't hire Epstein. Because he's a narcissist and, he thinks they would only hire geniuses like himself. But yeah, you guys want to cover that?
Let's go right into it, brother. It's wild how many names have come out. And I know they're trying to say, like, this isn't a direct implication of guilt and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, come on. Even just looking at Alan Dershowitz, you can kind of tell he's a diddler.
Sometimes you can just tell. Dude, I've had experiences like that in real life where older men will peg somebody as a creep, and then it turns out that they're right. But yeah, I think let's first look at this interview with Kim Iverson and Alan Dershowitz, and then we gotta also watch the interview that Dershowitz did on Fox News, defending himself, where he says, "How can you attack me but not condemn Hamas?" So let me just share my screen here if anyone has anything to say about this before we roll it. Sorry, Noah, do you have something?
I was just saying he's a cartoon character.
He is. Right now I'm compiling the Midwestern Marks Watch Mojo top 10 worst people of 2023. And let me tell you what, Alan Dershowitz is a strong contender for number one. He doesn't have as much power as some of the other horrific people in the world who might make that top 10 list. But as far as sheer sliminess and lack of integrity and lack of a backbone, they don't get much worse than Mr. Alan Dershowitz. So here's his interview with Kim Iverson, who's a fantastic reporter.
Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was in fact an agent of Mossad. There's a lot of evidence that point to this direction, and that they were operating a blackmail operation in order to get very powerful people, including people like yourself, in precarious positions to where you could potentially work.
Pause it real quick.
Of Israel.
I'm sorry to interrupt it already, but look how much Dershowitz is blinking. It's insane. And if you know anything about reading body language, if you're sort of like a nerd for the way cops work, like I am, that's supposedly a giveaway that someone is anxious about something, which is it could be an indicator they're lying. I mean, and look at him. That face diddles kids. It does. There's no other way to put it. So he's lying and diddling kids. I just want to put it out there that you can look at Dershowitz's face and tell. That's all.
It's in the. He does that in the Fox News video too, and that's what most of the comments were saying. Like, just from this guy's body language and the way he's interacting with the host, I feel like he's guilty.
Or protect the state of Israel.
I've been working on the state of Israel. I've been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. Jeffrey Epstein.
He also tries to turn it into a brag and a put down, right? Oh, you have ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, I've been friends with Jeffrey Epstein since before you were born, little girl. Okay, weirdo.
He once visited me in Israel. He had never been there. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He didn't work for the Mossad. The Mossad wouldn't hire him. And I hope he had videotapes of everybody, because they would show I never did anything improper. I have one other question. Are you used to having people come on your show to talk about one subject and then sandbagging them on another subject without any warning? Because it's nice to know you do that, and it will make certain that I have nothing to hide. I'm happy to talk about any of this, but I'm used to more ethical journalism.
No, we actually did notify the people who booked you onto the show that you would be asked about Epstein, and they assured us that you were aware of this.
No, they never notified me about that, and you'd have to show me that email.
Okay. One last question. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
No, of course not. Well, he didn't kill himself without the help of some people. He did kill himself, but he killed himself with the help of guards. He didn't do it by himself. He couldn't have done that, obviously, though.
So there's the part about Israel. There was the interesting part, and Kim Iverson also posted the receipts, and she told Dershowitz's handlers that he would be asked about Epstein specifically, and then Dershowitz acted like he was being taken off guard there, even though they told him explicitly he'd be asked about Epstein. And if you were the lawyer for a serial pedophile who was running a sex trafficking ring for the most powerful people in the world, you should kind of expect interviewers to ask you about that when you do a public interview, right? You know why I'm never going to get asked about that? Because I wasn't a lawyer for a serial pedophile. So easy solution to that problem there, Al.
Did you see how weird his response to Epstein killing himself was? It was as if he was trying to create a soundbite of him saying no, and then it was like no, and then no, but with a little bit of help, and then yes, he killed himself. He went through the whole spectrum of possible answers as to whether Epstein killed himself.
Yeah, that's the way these scumbags talk. It's in sound bites, right? He's not interested in really getting an actual conversation out there. Listen how he talked to her when he accused her of sandbagging him, and if you see her face when he says that, she goes, "What? What are you talking about, Dershowitz? Come on." We asked you about this. This is ridiculous. Again, I think you're right, Eddie, that he's the worst person of 2023 by far. I don't know if anyone could be worse than Dershowitz here. I think though that him thinking that working for the Israeli government is a good thing, and he said that with such pride. He may as well have been talking about the amount of kids he's sexually assaulted,
I mean, he's the lawyer for one of the worst and most high-profile sexual criminals in the world in human history, and he's defending Israel and their genocide at the International Court of Justice. I mean, all the worst causes of the last couple of years, Dershowitz has been a champion for, and he's been closely involved with the people perpetrating the genocide and the people perpetrating these sex crimes. So it doesn't get much more slimy than that.
And I don't know if we're going to be watching the Fox News interview, but he presents his defense of some of the worst people in human history as almost a noble cause, as if he's representing the oppressed and the downtrodden. He phrases it as, the people that have been the people that have been condemned for the most heinous things deserve representation too, even if they're guilty, sort of thing. And it comes out very I'm gonna make a shitload of money representing the biggest assholes of the elite, and I'm gonna phrase it as a noble cause.
Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, you are mentioned in this document. You are mentioned repeatedly, and very specifically, it was the allegation against you was that Epstein forced then minor Jane Doe number 3 to have sexual relations with you, and that also you were an eyewitness to sexual abuse of other minors by Epstein. You have been out there vigorously defending your name, your honor, and denying these allegations fiercely. And I want to give you a chance now that it's come out in writing tonight to get your reaction.
Well, first of all, the woman who accused me has now stated categorically that she may have misidentified me, confused me with someone else. And these documents, if all the documents are revealed, will prove categorically that she did misidentify me, that I never met her, never heard of her, never spoke to her. And I can prove it by independent means. I have all my travel records. I have all my television appearances. I can prove that I couldn't possibly have been anywhere near any of the people who were involved in this. I was Epstein's lawyer. Of course I flew on his plane with Ken Starr, with Roy Black, with other lawyers. We flew to meetings with the U.S. attorney, with the state attorney. And so people have to be very careful about what they're believing and when it happened. For example, as soon as Epstein was shown to be what he was, I ended my personal association with him completely, but I maintained a legal relationship with him. I represented some of the worst people in the world and continue to do so. That's my life. And of course I represented Epstein. Now, the one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals and think this is the worst thing in the world that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too.
Look how indignant he is. He's acting like somebody who's giving a stump speech for a just cause, or like he's Lenin speaking to the workers and peasants before the revolution. And really what he's doing is defending his relationship with a horrific sex criminal and the evidence that he was engaged in some of those horrific crimes.
I think that one of the aspects that's often left out of this conversation, and we've seen it quite plainly throughout the last couple of days, is the fact that people have not been able to see it as a systemic issue. It's not an individual issue. It's not just Epstein was a bad guy and that's it. Yeah, Epstein was an asshole, and everyone connected with him likely was too or is too, but it's a system that's premised on capital accumulation that produces conditions such that this, as heinous of a thing, which is one of the most horrific things human beings can imagine and participate in, is something that is done systematically, specifically by the elite, the riches of the richest, and their political puppets as well, which might not be in the same economic category, but do represent that economic category and function as their political puppet class. And that systemic analysis, you won't see a P ring in a socialist society. You won't see China develop a P ring or Cuba develop a P ring. These are the sorts of activities that you get with capitalism, and you could see that as the case with the example of the collapse of the Soviet Union. You did not have that in the Soviet Union. But as soon as shock therapy kicks in and capitalism goes back to the Soviet Union, these sorts of activities return. So it's a system that produces this because it commodifies everything. And the only bottom line, the only telos purpose goal of any sort of activity is profit making.
Two, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders
that there are absolutely zero hard evidence for. And I mean, do you condemn Hamas has become a meme at this point, and he is just taking that meme to the extreme. Like, sure, I was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but do you condemn Hamas? I had another point to make too, but I can't remember what it is now.
That's the one you're making right now is really important, right? Because what he does is he just, and this is like a tactic that they use in debates all the time. Lawyers know it very well. You just go on the offensive, right? Rather than have to actually defend and get to the truth of what is being said, you attack. And if they push back, you push it out of the way and attack some more. And it doesn't matter that the things he's saying have zero actual factual evidence behind them. He treats them as if they are. So then whoever is then forced to defend needs to clarify the facts, and they're already on the back foot. It's a really sleazy tactic that lawyers use all the time. And also, while we're on the subject of all this stuff, that doesn't mean that, there weren't criminals in communist countries. Of course there have been, but it's not an epidemic of the ruling class like this, right? I think that's what Carlos was really saying. I mean, the ability for elites to get so far outside of general social life that other human beings aren't as human to them when they're not in that elite level is something communist countries just don't have. When there's a criminal, they're an aberration, right? This is an epidemic. This is so countless people. We don't even know how many.
Did you
right?
guys see Ghislaine Maxwell's bourgeois feminist reply to everything that's going on?
No.
She basically said, out of all these people that were involved, it is only the women that, that is in jail. Trying to paint us all as good old patriarchy coming out to get only the women involved in the P rings, and not the men.
It's sexist. It is. Anyone who want all those. So Dershowitz says it's being pushed by the radical feminists, and Maxwell says it's being pushed by the patriarchy. Maybe you guys should just look in the mirror and realize that you're pieces of shit, and that anybody would be against this. What I was gonna say earlier, I remembered, is Dershowitz says, "I want a list of every radical feminist coming after me who won't condemn Hamas, because I'm the same as people who have had their land stolen and have been shoved into a concentration camp." But of course he wants a list of the people attacking him so he can get them fired from their jobs and pushed out of academia, which is what he does every time he gets destroyed in a debate or gets exposed by a real academic like Norman Finkelstein for the fraud that he is. So for those who don't know, he did a debate with Finkelstein, and he showed up completely unprepared, whereas Norman showed up completely prepared, had read Dershowitz's entire book and found like undeniable factual errors in his book, revealed them on Democracy Now!, destroyed Alan Dershowitz publicly, and then Dershowitz proceeded to go on what Noam Chomsky described as a jihad against Norman Finkelstein to get him fired from his job and make sure that he didn't get tenure at university. And he was successful in doing so, because this is a man who's rubbed elbows with the rich and powerful and has been a staunch defender for the worst and wealthiest people in the world for his entire career. So they were able to sabotage Finkelstein's career simply because Finkelstein defended the truth. So that's the kind of person Alan Dershowitz is. Noah nailed it. You know, he'll use the tactics of any third-rate lawyer to try and deflect, put all the blame on you. And if that doesn't work, if you're too prepared and you don't let him lie and smear you, then he comes for your job.
And by the way, he's a Harvard professor. Let's remember that these are Ivy League institutions, the supposedly creme de la creme of the bourgeoisie and their ideologues that are producing and elevating people like this. But I wanted to ask or make a general point. You know, some months ago, maybe almost a year ago now, there was the movie Sound of Freedom that came out, and the leftists treated it as just this right-wing conspiratorial thing. No one talked about it. We talked about it. We said, we have to reach out to our family members, community members, coworkers that are watching that movie and make the connection of how it is that it is only a capitalist society that can produce systematically these sorts of things and show these historical examples that we just mentioned. But considering how there has been such an affinity in some sectors of that right wing base in working class communities that were previously critical of the proxy war against Russia, now a good portion of them, significant portion of them, has bought into the Zionist narrative. I wonder if the fact that the literal lawyer of the Zionists that's going to make the case for them in the international criminal courts being Epstein's lawyer is going to influence how they think about Israel, since they've been so vehemently against the activities that Mr. Dershowitz's client Epstein was perpetuating at such a systematic level.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something very similar, that the way that they're going to view Dershowitz, is through the lens of sort of an anti-liberalism, right? They're going to see him as this liberal guy who's lying poorly, which is what he's really doing. And so my question would be, does the anti-liberalism override the sort of Islamophobic sentiment, since the Islamophobic sentiment is, as they're aware on some subconscious level, based in nothing, right? Based in what they hear. But when this is like straight up and in their face, I wonder if it can overcome it. And I think regardless, it's a really good way to talk to people about it, and go, you're really going to believe Epstein's lawyer, Epstein's lawyer about Hamas. That's who you're going with. That's your guy. You know what I mean? I guarantee you, if I talk to my coworkers like that, that would win them over in a heartbeat.
Here you can see how some of the Fox News commenters are reacting to this. Our comment actually got 9 likes. The way he pivots to Hamas is so disgusting. Never trust anyone who gets paid to lie for criminals. And keep in mind, this is the Fox News audience, right? So Alan Dershowitz, as Noah was saying there, less and less people are convinced by this. He can't even convince the Fox News viewers. You know, the people who are supposed to be brainwashed by this, you know, deflecting to Hamas. It's not working on them. Alan keeping a straight face while recounting this was Oscar worthy. Yeah, I was named, but what about Hamas? The deflection of the guilty and whataboutism this man displayed is bordering an admission of guilt. I love watching these predators squirm. I'm not as bad as Hamas is a weird defense. As a lawyer, he still failed to make himself sound credible. Seems to be guilty. So it's over for Dershowitz. He can't even convince the Fox News audience that he's a good guy. The only people who he can convince anymore is the Israeli government, is the literal fascists like Netanyahu, who have now picked him to defend them at the International Court of Justice. So what does that tell you about Israel? You know, as Noah said, Israel's associated with the same people as Epstein. What does that tell you about them? They literally have the same damn lawyer. Anything else on that segment, or should we answer these super chats?
Maybe to make a point, Compact Magazine, which has published a lot of good stuff from the socialist left in the past. A lot of Christian Parenti's articles have been published there, and other people whom we've interacted with. They published an article a couple of days ago from Alan Dershowitz, making the case that Israel has not committed any acts of violation of international law, but that Hamas has, which is just mind-bogglingly stupid. And for anyone interested, check out the article from Compact Magazine if you want your stomach to turn. But I did a reply to the article where I elaborate, just a small group of the crimes that Israel has committed, which would be considered international violations of international law. It would take volumes and volumes to chronicle all of the crimes of the Zionist Nazi state. I don't, I think even a more correct way to label it instead of fascist is Nazi. There was a lot of fascist states that were not exterminationist and genocidal, but the Nazi fascist state was, and I think that's what we're seeing now with the Zionist state. But I chronicle those, and I describe how it is that Compact Magazine, which has presented itself as this sort of almost like left-right anti-establishment space, the space of criticizing the deep state and the elite, also plays a function very similar to the compatible left and the forces that are used to present themselves as radical, but really to recuperate all of the energy that goes there and wants to actually go against capitalist imperialism. It recuperates it in forms like this. What are they doing publishing someone like Alan Dershowitz? What more of an expression of the elite's voice do you want than Alan Dershowitz from a publication that presents itself as a radical American journal? That's literally what their bio states on Twitter. We are a radical American journal. And then they publish this. It's again, these contradictions of bourgeois ideology that literally turn reality on its head. You couldn't have more of an opposite of being radical on this issue than that, but yet that's how they continue to present themselves. So if anyone's interested, make sure to check that out.